Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this final episode of the coverage of my performance, my games from the 2015 U.S. Open. We're down to the last round, so there's only one game in this video, round 9. But this game is maybe not the best game I played in the tournament, but certainly the most entertaining. So sit back and enjoy. My opponent kicked off with d4. By the way, my opponent is a junior player, junior meaning under the age of 18, with a rating of 1972, and my rating is 1793, so 180-point rating difference. I'm facing, once again, a strong young player, and I've got the black pieces. He kicks off with d4, I play d5. I play c4, I play c6, the Slav defense. And now he goes knight c3. A very popular move. It's the second choice after knight f3, which is the top choice there. But knight c3 is played a lot, and there's certain systems and repertoires that involve having the knight on c3. So players that play those kinds of systems will routinely put their knight on c3 in this position. So you see this quite a bit, and there's nothing wrong with it either. But you do get the chance to play an interesting gambit here, the Winawer gambit, and whenever I get the chance, I play it. So he takes on d5 first. The main move is just to take on e5 and leave the tension here between the c pawn and the d pawn. But he took first. The one downside of this, there's two things about it. One is it opens up the c6 square for my knight, so that's an advantage to black. And then the flip side of that, though, is that it leaves this pawn isolated, so that's a weakness that white can go after. So it has pros and cons, but in general I think it's better to leave the tension and just take on e5. Okay, so I push on with d4. The main idea of the Winawer gambit, to push this knight out of the way and deliver this queen check. And now normally the knight goes to e4. My opponent has actually never seen this this gambit before, so he's improvising at this point. He played the knight back to b1, which is not so bad, really. We actually transpose back into a normal position. I play the check here, and then he brings his knight to d2, which is a position we could have gotten into if he'd played knight e4 and then check and the knight back to d2. An interesting way to play. And now I give the check right away, but actually looking at this later with the chess engine, it says in this particular case I should take my time rounding up that pawn and just do some developing moves first. So it recommends playing knight to c6, getting the knight out here, which would be followed by knight f3, defending, and then bishop to g4, knight bd2, and then queen a5, and rounding up the pawn from this position. And actually we get to this identical position in the game, but white had some other options along the way. In the game I played queen a5 check immediately, and he blocked with the knight. We both thought that blocking with the bishop wasn't so good because the bishop seems to be kind of in the way of things. It's in the way of the queen, it's in the way of the knight. But well, the chess engine explains that this is the best move in the position. After bishop d2, I go ahead and grab the pawn. He plays knight f3, chasing my queen, and then he plays knight a3. And this is the idea that the bishop is not really blocking the knight. The knight is going to get into the game via the a3 square, and this actually is looking pretty good for white. Black has gotten the pawn back, but white has pretty good development here, and he doesn't really need the pressure on the on the d pawn. He doesn't have to be in a hurry to round that up. He can just complete his development and play on with just better development. So that would have been the best way for white to play in this circumstance, and that's why this early queen a5 check in this case was a little bit of a mistake. So he played knight d2 though, and as I said, we get to the same position. I go knight c6, he goes knight to f3, and I go bishop to g4. So I get my pieces out, and this is exactly the position we saw before. And at this point he comes up with an interesting idea. He plays queen to b3. It's kind of defending the knight from the side so he can take back with the queen, and it's also looking at the b7 pawn. So kind of a dual purpose move and very interesting. And so the next three moves are mistake, mistake, mistake. I make a mistake, he makes a mistake, and then I make a mistake. So the best move for me here in this position is to continue developing. Bishop to b4 is the recommended move by the chess engine. Bishop b4, a3 is not really threatening the bishop because there's a pin on the pawn. The rook in the corner is loose, but there's a potential for a future threat. And then knight to e7, and that's what the chess engine thinks I should play. Getting all my pieces out, getting prepared to castle, and I'm still a pawn down, but I have quite a lead in development, and it's a pretty good position for black. White's pieces are kind of tied up, so that's best play for me. After queen b3, though, I was attracted to this idea of taking the knight and getting the pawn back. But also there's this clever line I had found. He can't actually take on b7 here, because if he takes, this is what I had calculated, and this turns out to be correct. I can take this pawn here with my knight, and this is just a very funny situation. The knight's defending the bishop, which is under attack from pawns, but at least it means a queen can't take it. And the bishop at the same time is defending the rook, so the queen has to retreat, and then I can retreat my bishop and I'm a pawn up. I mean a piece up. So that's just winning. So he can't take on b7 after bishop takes f3. So he's got to take my bishop. And he took with the queen, which is certainly the most natural move in the position. But the chess engine points out that that is also a mistake. So instead of queen takes f3, he should have taken with the g-pawn. And look at this position. G takes f3. Now the queen is still attacking b7, and I have to do something about it. Castle's queenside is a logical move, defending the pawn, defending this pawn, getting the rook developed, and then I'll develop my kingside later. So that's a good move. But now he plays f4. And white is holding on to his extra pawn in this position, and he actually has easy development. He could put this bishop on a good diagonal. He can castle kingside. True, his kingside looks a bit messed up, but I can't immediately take advantage of that. So, and I'm under pressure over here on the queen side where I've castled. So, and white's a pawn up. So that's actually winning for white to take with the g pawn. so that was my mistake, was taking the knight. His mistake was taking back with the queen. And now my next mistake was taking this pawn with the knight, which I played knight takes. And I just thought it was way too risky for him to grab this pawn. But in fact, he can grab that pawn and get away with it. So in this position, let's see, what should I play instead of knight takes? I could take with the queen, and then the knight is still shielding the b pawn, or I could bring the rook to d8 and just defer, hold on to my pawn and defer the recapture of this pawn for a little bit. So those are reasonable options, but well, I played this move. And I really thought it was too risky for him to take on b7. But he considered this position for a long time and decided eventually it was okay. So I got my pawn back, but then he grabbed a pawn. So I'm still a pawn down. We're still in gambit territory here. But I do have a lot of space. But there are some threats. The queen is hitting the rook, so I go rook d8. I mean, it looks like his only developed piece is the queen, and I've got a few pieces out, but I still need to develop my king side. So you can see that there are there may be issues with my position as well. But I was feeling okay during the game. It's only later, looking at it with the chess engine, the chess engine thinks that white should probably go on to win from this position. So anyway, he goes g3. I guess the key move here, the reason the engine likes this position so much, is the engine wants to play the move e3 right away and dissolve this pawn in the center. So the line the chess engine gives is e3, pawn takes, bishop check, so getting the bishop out with a tempo and driving this knight back to an awkward square and then recapturing the pawn. So white's pawns become a bit messed up, but he does say a pawn up, and my pieces are kind of tied up here. And that's this position as a pretty strongly favors white. And I think I can see that now. But he played the logical move g3. He's just trying to get his pieces developed. And I feel the same way. I get my knight out. He gets his bishop out. And now I go bishop to d6. So this move comes with a threat. And so if you want to pause the video, see if you can figure out what I'm threatening here. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. The threat is I'm threatening to trap his queen with rook to b8. because the queen has no squares to go to. The knights are covering all the squares on the diagonal, so the queen can't escape along this diagonal, which it would normally want to. And along this rank here, along the 7th rank, all those squares are covered. It can't come back this way or that way. And then my queen is covering his queen's escape in this direction. So his queen looks to be trapped, or it looks like I'm threatening to trap his queen. And he overlooked this and just castled. And I played rook b8. and so you might think this would be game over, but it's a complicated and tricky position. There are ways that there are a number of different variations that I had to calculate here. Let me put it that way. So we'll first look at what he played. He played bishop to c6 check, getting the bishop out with tempo. And now if I take the bishop, then he takes back with the queen, and he just stays a pawn up and with a good position. He also takes with check. So that's not in the cards. Not good for black, is what I mean. If I try and block the check with my knight, then he can exchange out with check, and then by getting rid of this knight, he's created some escape squares for his queen. His queen can now retreat, and he saves the queen, and once again he stays a pawn up, and that is good. So the only move for black to stay in the game here is to play king to f8, which is what I played, and now I have an advantage. He tried knight to b3, kicking my queen. And once again, I think there's only one move here that really keeps the advantage. See, the problem is that he's chasing my queen away from the defense of the A file here, which is going to give his queen an escape. Okay, so if you want to pause the video and see if you can find the move here that saves the game for me. Okay, I'm giving the answer away now. I found the move, and I played queen to d8. And now, no matter where his queen goes, his queen is still under attack. He can't attack my queen any further. He has a choice between these two squares. But wherever it goes, I'm going to grab the bishop. If the queen goes to a6, then I have rook to b6, hitting the queen and hitting the bishop, so that just wins it. What he played in the game was queen takes a7, and I played knight takes c6. And so I have one apiece in exchange for 2 pawns. He got a second pawn, and he was already a pawn up. So the game continued for quite a while from there, but let's back up. There were a number of interesting possibilities. One line I calculated, instead of this bishop c6 check, I thought he might try knight to b3 rather, hitting my queen, knight to b3. Let's put that on the board, knight to b3. So this kicks my queen. Now my queen, though, the interesting thing about the bishop on c6 was it was also covering this square, so when my queen came under attack, I couldn't retreat. But now I have this square. I can just drop my queen back to a4, holding on to this pawn, and his queen is still under attack. And now knight to c5 hits my queen again. Kind of a funny move. But if I take his knight, what happens? Yeah, I can't take his knight because the bishop is protecting the rook. So the knight's safe on that square, and it's attacking my queen. Now, when I calculated this line, I thought I could play rook takes queen, and then he's got to take my queen. And then I thought I would play rook here, trapping the knight, because I noticed that the knight has no squares that it can go to. I'm covering all of these squares. So that's how I was planning to win a piece in that line. Unfortunately, this doesn't work because he can just play b3, defending his knight. He doesn't have to move it. So, but I'm still winning in this line. I would just have to find the move, and instead of rook takes b7, just queen to c2, retreating the queen in a way, getting the queen out of trouble, putting it on a square where it can't be attacked. His queen is still under attack, and after his queen moves, then I can grab the knight with my queen, and so I win a piece in that line. So it looks like I'm winning a piece in all lines, but there is one escape for white. There's one move that white can play here and come out ahead. So see if you can find the move. Okay, I may have briefly mentioned this, so if you heard knight c4, and thought of the move knight c4. That is the right answer. Knight to c4. What a funny move. Well, it's another move that attacks my queen. And the problem is, let's see, no, not knight b3, but the other one, knight c4. I pretty much have to take the knight. I mean, it looks like the piece is hanging there. So I should take it. My queen is under attack, and if I retreat, then he can just retreat his queen. Also, my bishop is hanging, so I really need to take that knight. But now I'm a piece up, I think. But he has queen to c6 check, a queen check here, and two pieces of mine are hanging. So that's what you have to see, and that saves the game for white. White would actually go on, well, would have an advantage. Let's see, my best move is king e7, holding onto the bishop, giving up the knight, and then, well, bringing the rook out, indirectly protecting this pawn. So in this position, I'm a pawn down. I've got all my pieces out, so I do have a slight edge in development, but, well, white is secure over here. White is castled. White just needs to develop his bishop, and he does have the bishop pair. So I no longer have enough compensation for the gambit, and white should go on to win. So that would have been best play in this position right here after rook b8, that funny knight to c4 move. And that would have saved the day. So anyway, my opponent didn't find it. Like I said, he played bishop c6 check. And so I moved my king out of the way. He played knight b3 attacking my queen, retreat the queen to the back rank. And now he played queen takes a7, grabbing the pawn. And I play knight takes c6, grabbing the bishop. And now I'm a piece up. He goes queen a4 with a double attack on my knight and the pawn, hoping to get a third pawn for the piece. But I play queen b6, holding on to things. He goes rook to d1, activating his rook and putting another piece on the d-pawn. So right here, after all of those moves, which I calculated pretty well, but there was a lot of deep thought, I play one careless move right here and give up a lot of my advantage. So the careless move I played is g6. And he immediately snapped out a response here, which is pretty good. So what is White's immediate response here? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. He immediately played bishop to h6, and hitting my queen, developing his bishop with tempo, hitting my king. And I don't want to go here and have my king trapping my rook. That would just be too awkward. So I play king e7. And now white gets lots of counterplay. I still have a slight edge, but white gets lots of counterplay. So just a more cautious move like h6 right here would be enough. But some kind of relapse occurred. After all of that careful thinking, considering what all my opponent was going to play, I play this move, g6, without giving any thought at all to the most obvious response that my opponent has to play. And so he played bishop h6. I play king e7. He gets his other rook into the game. And I play rook b to c8, defending. I thought, it's more natural, I should say, to bring the h-rook over here. And during the game, I thought there was some kind of tactical problem with that, but I couldn't find it afterwards. So that would have been an okay move too. But this is not bad. And now he goes e3, going after this pawn, trying to dissolve this pawn weakness. So throughout this stage of the game, there's just a slight edge to black. White just doesn't quite have enough compensation for being down a piece, and I should eventually manage to unwind here. I start with knight to g4, hitting his bishop. He goes bishop g7, interesting move, attacking my rook. Go to g8, and then he played knight takes d4, rounding up this pawn. And I could just take this knight. I do have some problems here with this knight. I have to do something about it. It's under fire, but taking the knight seems to be fine. I didn't like this, maybe because the bishop gets a tempo on the queen, but the queen can drop back to b7, and everything is okay here. He's managed to get a third pawn for his piece, but well, this actually the queen on b7 is in pretty good spot here. He has trouble controlling the light squares, and my knight is in a position where it might be able to help with this attack on the light square. So interesting position with a little edge for black still. I instead played the move knight c to e5. getting out of there and keeping more force on the board. Maybe that was the other idea too, is just trying not to simplify too much. But also, if he wants to simplify, he has to get rid of this bishop, which was kind of an annoying piece. So, but he did. He decided to simplify with bishop takes. I take back with the knight. And then he makes a mistake here. So up to this point, slight edge to black, but white can hold. Ever since I played this move, g6, allowing him to get that quick development with his bishop and making my king awkward. White's been in the game. But right here he makes a mistake, and then suddenly I'm better again. So what's the engine saying? Oh, the engine is saying he can just liquidate here and go for the endgame with queen b5. And we get a bunch of exchanges. But the move he played is f4. So here's another tactical quiz for you. What is my response to this move f4? What would you play, or what is the tactic that you see in this position? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. I started with first exchanging rooks, so that he has a undefended rook on c1. Although, strictly speaking, that wasn't necessary. And then the idea is to play knight f3 check, which by what I meant was that knight f3 check could have been played immediately too. And now the idea is revealed. If he takes the knight, then the queen comes in here with check, forking the rook and the king. So that just wins a pawn and the exchange. So he has to move his king away from the check. He went to h1. And now the chess engine says the best way for me to play this is to actually play queen takes b2 here, because if he takes my knight, I'm going to take his rook. The line given is queen takes b2, knight to c6 check, king to f6, kind of funny, and then queen to c2, and then trading and going into this endgame. That's what the engine says, and it thinks I'm just winning here. I've got an extra piece, and he only has 2 pawns, so that's pretty good. I decided to simplify in a different way. I took with the knight, and now I took his knight. And now if he takes with the pawn, then I am going to grab here, and that should be good for me. I get a pawn back, and his pawn is isolated here as well. So he has to take with the queen, and I take, and he takes. And then I play king e6, and this was my idea. At the end, I thought I could just round up this pawn, and he would just have 2 pawns for the piece, and that shouldn't be enough for him. That should be an endgame that I could win. And in fact, I am winning. I have been winning ever since that f4 move was played that allowed the knight f3 tactic. So once again, I'm in the driver's seat. But the game goes on. So he plays rook to c6. I go rook to d8, defending my bishop, and also I was worried about him getting to the second rank, so he goes rook b6 with the idea of coming here to b7, and I just cover it this way, just trying to keep things under control. I don't want to get him counterplay. I need to hold on to these pawns, because at the end I may need to sacrifice my bishop to stop these pawns, and I need to have some extra pawns on the king's side to win with. So he goes a4, he starts pushing his pawns. I go king d5, rounding up this guy. He goes a5. Take, and now b4, and it is a bit tricky here. He's got strong counterplay with these pawns, but I'm still doing okay here. But this b4 move is kind of annoying because it prevents my king from coming directly back into the game, so I have to kind of attack these pawns from behind with the king. I go king c4. But in this position I should still be winning. Basically, even though he's got 2 pawns against the bishop, they're connected and they're advanced. His king is out of play, and that's the real thing that makes the difference here. With my king, bishop, and rook, and with his pawns just still back far enough that I have time to stop them, I should be able to round them up and win the game. So he pushes on with b5 here. That allows my king to come forward, king to c5, and then but this king to c5 move didn't really threaten anything. He gets his king 1 step closer. So I had originally played this king c5 move to hold on to my bishop, so my rook would be free to move, and I was thinking I could play rook here. But there's a problem with that, which is he has rook to c6 check, and driving my king away from the defense of the bishop or if I go this way, if I go to the B file, then he can take my bishop, and if I go to the D file, then my king is cut off, and he can advance the A pawn. So I have to be careful here. I had to stop and reconsider. And keep in mind we're on move 37, and the time control is 2 hours for 40 moves. So I've got 3 moves to go to make the time control. And I had enough time. I'm pretty good at time management, but there is that constant pressure going. So I thought about this for a while, and I had enough time to think about it, and I came up with a plan that I thought was winning. And it starts with the move king to b4. And this forces the A pawn forward. And now his rook is loose. And I played the move king to a5 to attack the rook. And I thought that was just winning, because where can the rook go? If the rook goes to b7, I can trade it off. And then the bishop stops the pawn from queening. The pawn on b7 will never become a queen, and I can just mop up these pawns. So that's just winning. But after king to a5, which I played, he has a terrific move here. And so see if you can spot the move that white plays in this position. Okay, I'm giving the answer away once again. He plays a7, and there's no way to save the bishop. I have to take the pawn to prevent it from becoming a queen. I don't have time to take his rook. Even though I'm threatened to take his rook, I'm not really threatening once he's pushed this pawn. And so it would go like this. In fact, this is how the game went. And we ended up in this kind of drawish position. So instead of king to a5, though, I'm still winning this position. I've been winning, like I said, ever since he played f4, and I've had that knight f3 check tactic. So what is the winning move here? And I probably had enough time to find it if I had thought about it. The problem was that I thought the move that I played, king a5, was just winning, and I didn't look for an alternate move. I missed the idea of that pawn push to a7. So, but there is a winning move here if you want to pause the video and think about it. Okay, the winning move is bishop to c5. It's a little hard to find because I like the bishop on this diagonal, stopping the pawn from queening and taking that square away from the rook. So attacking the rook with the bishop and giving up the b8 square seemed like the wrong thing to do. But watch what happens. First of all, if he goes to b7, then once again I can take, and then I can just drop the bishop back to c6, prevent this pawn from queening, and then my king gobbles up these pawns. So that's no problem. And so that the only other square the rook can go to is rook to b8, which is where it would probably go, and then bishop to a7. And now with the bishop on a7, it's taken away all of the squares for that rook. So the rook has nowhere to go. Once again, if it goes to b7, it'll get traded. So if it goes somewhere trying to get active, maybe attacking the h-pawn, I can first save the h-pawn. Actually, the engine gives that line. And then maybe the king comes in. But basically, there's no way to defend the b-pawn. I'm gobbling these up, and I just will win with the extra piece. So that's the answer. And if he doesn't go and attack one of my pawns, then I'll just take this immediately. So he doesn't have time to do something like rook here to rook there to defend the pawn. That takes 2 moves, and I'm just taking the pawn immediately. So that was the win. And right here, bishop c5, and I would have won the game. Instead, I played king a5, thinking I was winning. He played a7, and the game continued like this. I took the pawn, he took my bishop, I took his pawn. And now it's actually, material is even, pawns are on one side of the board, so typical kind of drawish king and pawn endgame, except that my king is potentially cut off here. It's a little bit away from the action. So white is the only one that has winning chances here. And so he tries to win. He goes king to h3. I go king to c5, hitting his rook. His rook dropped back. And then I just move my king to c6. I can't get any closer to the action. And what I wanted to do was open up the 4th rank for my rook, so my rook can cut his king off and keep his king from getting into the action. It's very important to try and keep control over things like that and have an active rook. So he pushed on with g4. I played h5. we got this exchange, and then he went after the pawn with his rook. So I can use this 5th rank defense. I defend laterally with my rook, and he can come forward and attack with his king. But now I have the nice move, rook to f4. So these pawns are just close enough together that I can stop this pawn, and at the same time his king can't go to either of these squares. My rook controls that one, my pawn controls that one. So he really has nothing he can play here. He went for the exchange. He took that pawn, so I take the f pawn. I don't want to take the rooks. I want to keep the rooks on. He comes in with his king, hitting my rook. I drop back to f1, and now he tried checking, but finally I can start bringing my king into the game. And after a few more moves, he goes rook f6. I went rook g1 check. He went here. Now I'm going to be able to bring my king in. So he just resigned at this point. I mean, no, we agreed to a draw at this point. He offered a draw, and I accepted it. So that's how the game ended, in a draw. A very even position at the end, a very back and forth and fun game. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and also, this look at my tournament play. You got to see 9 straight games, so a sequence of how I play in a typical over-the-board situations, the ups and the downs. And, well, I'll be going back to the normal content on this channel after this with some blitz games and other videos starting tomorrow. See you then. Bye.